Norway is on the verge of becoming incredibly rich. Remember when Russia invaded Ukraine? Many European countries looked to Norway for their oil and gas supplies. This boosted Norway's oil exports by 5 times, making them the biggest supplier in Europe. Their economy is booming, and they've wisely invested those profits into a giant government pension fund. Today, this fund is worth about $1.5 trillion, which is like $270,000 for every single person in Norway. They just discovered a massive deposit of phosphate rock in an area south of Stavanger. This mineral is super important. It's used in fertilizer, batteries, solar panels, and even electric cars. It's a rare mineral with about 70% of the global supply in countries like Morocco, China, Egypt, and Algeria. These areas pose geopolitical challenges for Western countries. Norway announced they found 70 billion tons of this stuff. That would instantly make them the world's biggest player in the phosphate game. Isn't that mind-blowing? This discovery could elevate Norway to a whole new level of wealth. At current prices, the phosphate rock could be valued at $24 trillion, similar to the worth of all of Saudi Arabia's remaining oil reserves. However, there are some hurdles. The European Union might have some regulations. There might be technical challenges in getting the rock out, and there are always environmental concerns. Despite this, Norway is poised to become the wealthiest nation in the world. Have you ever heard that Norway was a poor country before it discovered oil? Well, that's not quite true. Back in the 1950s, Norway was already doing pretty well. It was known for its fish and timber exports, and it had even figured out how to use its mountains to generate electricity. This was a game changer for its economy because it allowed them to build factories and other businesses. By the 1950s, Norway was already well-educated, wealthy, and had a strong democracy. They were even culturally progressive for their time. But oil? Nobody believed Norway had oil riches under its maritime territory. They'd even surveyed their coastline for oil but found nothing. It all changed when the Dutch found a massive gas field. That got everyone interested in the North Sea, but Norway's government was cautious. First, they worried foreign companies would take all the profits. Second, nobody knew exactly where Norway's borders ended in the sea. What if they found oil but another country claimed it? Luckily, these issues didn't last long. In May 1963, a royal decree declared the sea under Norwegian control. 2 years later, European countries agreed on maritime boundaries, using the median line principle. Then, Norway opened bidding to foreign companies. And so began the hunt for oil in the Norwegian North Sea. It wasn't easy. There were failed attempts, but eventually they struck gold. Well, black gold. The oil field they found was massive, a real game changer for Norway's economy. It took time for Norway to take full charge. Initially, foreign companies led the way, but Norway wanted control. So in 1972, they created Statoil, now Equinor, a government-owned company. Even today, the government holds 2/3 of Statoil, with the rest owned publicly. Under Statoil's leadership, Norway made big moves. They built refineries, trained workers, and kept most oil profits at home. This was rare. You might have heard of the resource curse. It's a term economists use for countries that have a lot of oil but end up not doing so well economically. They might not have much democracy or fairness in society, and the oil money often ends up in the pockets of a few powerful people, not the average citizen. But Norway dodged that curse. They didn't end up with a bunch of super rich people and a lot of poor people. Instead, they became one of the happiest countries in the world. Today, Norwegians have a lot of money. Their average income is over $100,000 per person. Plus, they live longer and enjoy the fantastic quality of life. So, what's their secret? First off, Norway already had a strong democracy before they found oil. This meant they could manage their own oil resources without relying heavily on outside companies. Also, with a small population of only about 3.5 million people, it was easier to share the wealth. Plus, having friendly neighbors certainly helped. There are other reasons too, like cultural factors and smart government decisions. For example, unlike Denmark, which sold their oil fields to private companies, or the UK, which used oil money for tax cuts, Norway did something unique. They saved most of their oil money in a giant government fund, like a piggy bank for the entire country. Today, this fund is worth a whopping $1.5 trillion, making it the biggest of its kind in the world. Here's the coolest part. In 2023, this fund earned them a huge amount of money, $380 million. But the government only allowed itself to spend a tiny portion, just 3%. The rest is saved for future generations. That's some serious long-term planning. The other side of this is that only the government is becoming wealthy. But why don't people see this money in their bank accounts even though they technically own it? It's like a balancing act for Norway, spending on important things now but also saving for later. This approach has made Norway richer compared to other countries that rely on natural resources. Norway has a big pot of money called a sovereign wealth fund, which keeps them stable. They've also worked hard to have a diverse economy, so they're not too dependent on things like oil and gas, which only make up a fifth of their economy. But now, with the war in Ukraine, Norway's petroleum industry is doing really well. And now they've stumbled upon phosphate, right? It's not just any phosphate, it's a huge deposit, deeper than anyone expected. Imagine, it could potentially supply the world for the rest of the century. Right now, China has a big hand in the phosphate industry, but Norway's findings could change that. China once limited its phosphate exports, which drove up prices everywhere else. It shows that now, it's not just about how much stuff there is, but who controls it. Norway could shake up this system if they control most of the phosphate. Today, China controls about 30% of the industry, but its control is mainly over the refineries, not so much the phosphate rock itself. In 2021, China slowed down phosphate exports, sending prices soaring worldwide. It's like they hold the strings to a puppet show, controlling things for their own reasons. But you know what happened next? Global prices shot up even more in response to China's move. It's like a domino effect in the global economy. Do you think prices are still determined by just supply and demand? Not really. Nowadays, a country with a big stake in the market can sway things for political or economic reasons. That's why Norway's discovery is such a big deal. If they control more than half of the world's supply, they could have a major say in setting prices. So it's not surprising that Norway's government is excited about plans to extract these minerals. But the EU isn't as thrilled. Even though Norway isn't an EU member, they're part of the European Economic Area, so European laws still affect them. The EU worries about pollution from refining phosphate, which is why much of that industry has moved away from Europe. In 2024, the EU will vote on a bill that could either speed up or slow down Norway's mining plans. This could spell trouble for Morocco, which currently supplies much of the world's phosphate. If Norway suddenly floods the market, prices will drop and Morocco's phosphate industry could suffer. It's a tricky situation with many factors to consider. One challenge for Norway is the technology. Right now, they can only extract phosphate from depths of up to 1,500 meters. That leaves a lot of it out of reach, but remember, when Norway found its first oil, they faced similar technological hurdles. Now, that oil well has been producing for over 50 years. Who knows what they'll achieve with phosphate? Share your thoughts in the comments. And if you found this video interesting, don't forget to like and subscribe. Thanks for watching.